Achieving net zero emissions by 2050 is a significant focus of policymakers these days. And a group out of Paris, France, the Energy Transition Commission, has put out a report called Making Mission Possible, which is how to decarbonize the really tough sectors of the economy, such as making cement or aviation. And we're going to be talking to Laetitia de Villepin of the Energy Transition Commission. So welcome to the interview, Laetitia.
Thank you, Mark. I'm very happy to be there.
Why don't we start out, if you could give me a quick overview of what the report says.
Of course. So the key message of the report is the following. It said that a net zero global economy is both technically and economically possible by mid-century. So technically, what does it mean? It basically means that the technologies and all business solutions needed to achieve net zero are either already available or close to being brought to market. On the financially or economically possibility side, it means that in many sectors, the shift to net zero is or will soon be profitable. And in other where the shift requires heavy investment, it's actually affordable. All additional investments needed to reach this goal are actually equivalent to 1 to 1.5% of the global GDP. It's affordable, especially if you compare it to the cost of doing nothing. So that's the what. The how requires a complete transformation of the global energy system. It starts obviously with a heavy ramp up and acceleration of clean electrification, but it also requires additional technologies such as hydrogen, biomass, or carbon capture, storage and use. To do all that, government, investor, corporates, and also the civil society will need to work together to deliver the priorities in the short term and in the coming decades.
Now, hydrogen in particular is a focus in Canada these days. Both the federal government and the Alberta government, which is kind of the Texas of Canada, are going to be releasing hydrogen strategies in the next few weeks. What role will hydrogen play in decarbonizing the heavy-duty sectors?
So before talking about hydrogen, let me remind that the real primary route is clean electrification for obvious efficiency reasons. Whenever we can, we should electrify. And even in the harder to abate sectors, which cover heavy industry, but also long distance transport, for example, some electrification is feasible. When that's not the case, hydrogen can play a role. Hydrogen is actually a very good complement to electrification. And the key challenge here is that the whole value chain of hydrogen has to be scaled up. Whereas for electrification, we know how to do it, and the costs have already dramatically decreased. So we separate sectors between easy to electrify and harder to abate. And hydrogen is a very good solution in the second bucket. The both are very, very much linked because, as you might know, hydrogen can come from two routes, either green hydrogen, where hydrogen is produced from green electricity and water. So it's very much linked to the decreasing cost of electricity, or blue hydrogen, which comes from burning methane and capturing the carbon emissions, so that it's still a net zero solution. And in that case, it basically depends from the cost of methane and the cost of the carbon capture and storage process. So we're quite optimistic for hydrogen because you have a small efficiency loss, but it will follow the decreasing cost trends of electrification. The whole challenge is to ramp this up, which is why most governments are working on hydrogen plans these days.
Now, are you optimistic that governments around the world are committed to this? Because I know in your report you say that you think that the developed world can get there by 2050, the developing countries by 2060. Is that a realistic goal?
It is. For the reason mentioned previously, we do believe that it is both technically and economically feasible. What we need is a short-term acceleration of both the ambitions, the investments, and the political will. What we see these days and in the run-up to COP26 is quite encouraging. So last week, China announced a net zero target for 2060, which is very much aligned with what we say here in our report, but also what we say in our China ETC, which published a report last year called China 2050, stating that this is also in China and with the specific resources and challenges in China, economically and technically feasible.
Is the finance community coming to the table on this? Because at the end of the day, I've seen the numbers from the International Energy Agency about the trillions of dollars that are required to get to where we need to go. Are you encouraged that the financial community will make the capital available?
So the finance community is very much interested in the net zero journey. We in the ETC have a finance work stream and are working quite closely to major financial institutions. The key challenge here is for them to have the policy and investment environment which would make the scale up of green finance profitable and meaningful for them. Here, what we need to do is to help them channel their investment towards net zero activity and divest from carbon intensive activities. A bunch of tools are available to do so. And they're actually helping us and helping key industrials solving the chicken and egg dilemma of having no investment, hence no supply and hence no demand. So yes, the finance community is coming to the table.
Now, this will be my last question, Laetitia. In Canada, we have a very carbon intense industry called the oil sands. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And it's a real conundrum on how to decarbonize that. I think technically it's feasible, and the companies, the producers are they have aspirational commitments to 2050, which in my opinion isn't good enough, but grist for another conversation. What happens to an industry, do you think, like this, that is slow to decarbonize and it is carbon intense? Will there be a lot of international pressure, sanctions, those sorts of things applied to get put pressure on the industry to get to where it needs to be?
Well, on the industry side, it's a real challenge because producing net zero in harder to abate sectors comes with an OPEX and CAPEX premium today. So the key question is how to create this environment which will incentivize these industries to make these very heavy and strategic choices towards net zero. One key policy tool here is first obviously to kill all subsidies to carbon intensive activities, but also to create a coherent and as much as possible international framework of carbon pricing. What we see in the European Union so far is a discussion about a carbon border tax adjustment, which would help local industries decarbonize without them being penalized by the competition from carbon intensive industries from outside the Union.
Right, I know that's a big issue in Canada because the oil producers are asking for, because they're in energy intense, trade exposed industries, they want some kind of protection. But too often that means discounts from the current carbon pricing, which then kind of dilutes the effect of the carbon pricing to begin with.
Indeed, which is why we need a harmonized, coherent, but also ambitions in terms of carbon pricing scheme.
Are you confident that the international community will commit itself to carbon pricing and these border adjustments that are necessary?
I can't say anything globally, especially with the major uncertainty on geopolitics today. What we see in specific geographies is a lot of political goodwill. And I'm speaking about the EU, India, and China, for example. We can only hope that in the coming years and decades, these geographies come together to create this kind of a harmonized carbon pricing scheme. But I can't predict the future.
Laetitia, thank you very much for this. Very insightful, and I'm going to look forward to chatting with you again and get a little more information for my viewers on what your commission is up to. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Markham. Have a good day.